Hello all, welcome to today's class of political science. So we'll be having a discussion on Plato today, and the main objective of this lesson is to help you understand Plato's Western philosophical thought, his influence on the upcoming Western philosophers, and especially his main critic Aristotle, and the influences he had from the previous philosophers like Socrates, and his idea of ideal state, his view on philosopher king, and why did he hate it, democracy so much than anybody else, and also his elements which are crucial in establishing an ideal state, and Aristotle's criticism of Plato. So let us dive into it. We'll be having a session on introduction, his early life and works of Plato, his theory of justice, Plato and soul, Plato and his the division of soul, the ideal state, the basic elements of ideal state, and his other works, which are Statesmen and the Laws, Aristotle's criticism of Plato, and we'll end up with a summary summarizing the contribution of Plato to the Western philosophical thought. So, in the introduction, if you know, the Plato is the greatest ever philosopher that ever produced by the ancient Greece. So, he is also considered as father of political philosophy. Here you have to understand, he is called as a father of political philosophy, and the father of political science is Aristotle. So, especially if we are reading or as the exam is objective type, you have to attend this classes or session. The main agenda is to help you understand or approach answer more in an MCQ pattern rather than a theoretical pattern. So Plato is a follower of dialectic method where he come to an argument or come to the conclusion in the form of dialogues, in the form of arguments, explaining the arguments between the individuals. And his political thoughts shall be desirable to have an idea of his life and times. So if we understand, any political philosopher are made of his times, which means the theories that they come up with, the ideas that they come up with are especially the influences they had during their times they were in. So in Plato also, his early life, he was born in 427 BC in Athens in an aristocratic family. So basically, he's born in a rich aristocratic family. He was born, we can say, he was born with a silver spoon. And his original name, his real name that when named by his parents is Aristocles. And you can understand the Plato's concept of ideal state is because he witnessed the humiliating defeat of Athens in Peloponnesian War, which happened during 431 BC to 404 BC. So if you can see, Plato was born around this era in 427 BC. So almost all his entire life, he witnessed this war where the Athens, one of the most strongest Greek city-state, saw its defeat, and the defeat of Athens in war against Sparta, establishment of tyrannical rule, and execution of Socrates. So the main influences he had are three. A defeat of Athens in war against Sparta. Athens is one of the strongest democratic Greek city-state, but in a war against Sparta, it lost unimaginably, to which he says corruption is a main reason for Athens to lose war against Sparta. And establishment of the tyrannical rule. He says democracy is a tyrannical rule. He says democracy is ruled by all, is tyranny against all by the all. And also execution of Socrates. If you understand, Socrates is the teacher of Plato, and Plato almost all his life he gave higher status to Socrates in his life. So his execution, that is during the Socrates was actually enabling the younger or the youth to help understand the reasons, ideas that how one individual must have their freedom of speech and etc. So the power thought this is going against their wishes. So they executed Socrates, which actually caused a deep influence on Plato's life. And he returned to Athens after his death. And He went all around the world for a while, then established a university, which is known as academy. And this is where Aristotle joins as a student. And this academy, Plato's university, is known as academy. So this academy is first and the foremost ancient university, where the long discourses and discussions based on argumentative and dialectical methods. So the main discourses or the main curriculum in this academy is to have arguments and come to a conclusion based on dialectical methods, like in the form of dialogues. You just cannot randomly come up with a theory or anything. You have to help each other understand why do you want to pursue that theory. So Plato spent most of his time guiding his and inspiring his disciples, because he was deeply, if you go to the previous slide, we can say he was deeply disappointed by the war. He was disappointed by the execution of Socrates. So he spent most of his life guiding and inspiring disciples of who has come to the academy. So next, works of Plato. This is actually most important one. This actually, especially in an MCQ exam, you have to understand the works of Plato in chronological order. So first and the foremost is Republic, which is in 386 BC. Then comes the Statesman, which is 760 BC. And the next one is Laws, which is 347 BC. So Rousseau describes Republic as the greatest treatise on education. He, as we can all know by now, that he is a hater of democracy of all the times. So he follows Republic to be the best because it is a treatise on education. So this was by the Rousseau, which we'll be reading about it in the coming lessons. And the next, his actually works. These are most important works of Plato. Okay, so Republic, Statesman, and the Laws. But he wrote many other works and the pamphlets published. So his work can be divided into three categories, where these works are returned based on his life. One were written in early life, one were written in middle age, and the other one was later part of his life. So the category one are Apology and Crito, Memo, Protagoras, and Gorgias. So objects contentions of opponents without giving his opinions on their views. So you can see, as this is given in a very early stage, his objections were mostly like on the lame things or anything which was a proper answering to those concepts. So the next category is Republic, Phaedrus, and Phaedo. So the positive doctrines with the help of myths. So he helped understand over a period he learned and how the dialogues must be made. And these doctrines were helped to understand with the help of the other imaginary or other worldly topics. So the category 3, which is that it was written in later part of his life, just Statesman, Philebus, Critias, Laws. Laws is also known as political philosophy. And this political philosophy is basically about state and individual. So you can see his evolution or the arch over a period from early life to the later part of his life. If we talk from the movie perspective, where a character arch raises or the character arch decreases, same thing, the Plato's also, over a period, he started understanding the empirical method he started following. So the normative method, which was followed by Plato earlier, was slowly coming back to the empirical steps. So in the next slide, we'll understand influences on Plato. So Plato was more or less influenced by these Pythagoras, Parmenides, Heraclitus, and Socrates. So this four persons or four philosophers or the scientists, they influenced Plato in writing his theories through one or other concepts of their own theories. So from Pythagoras, he learned or understand that wisdom and idea are the essence behind all the material things. And he learned the concept of trans migration of soul, where if a soul goes off in this world, the soul leaves the body and moves to the other world. And from Heraclitus, he understood that life is a continuous change and nothing is permanent in this world, which is keep changing. Like nothing is fixed. You cannot rely upon the things which are not permanent enough. So Parmenides, he learned change and motion are illusion of sense, and the reality is eternal. Like reality is forever, and this change and motion, that the changes we keep seeing are just an illusion of the reality. And from Socrates, he learned knowledge is virtue, theory of reality, and theory of knowledge. So the next slide, main concept of Plato. So Plato's theory of justice, uh, from book Republic, which is titled as a concerning justice. This is a very important MCQ. So concerning justice means what? Righteousness. So this is also an important MCQs. But also there are three different views of justice. This is not theory, so you have to understand that we are quick uh, to revise and revise and revise. So we have to understand and we have to quick read in between the lines. So that's why if you are going for a theory of justice, what you should remember, it is from a book Republic titled as Concerning Justice. And what does justice mean to Plato? So it means righteousness. So how many views of justice that Plato looked into? So there are three views of justices. One is the selfless justice is paying one's own debt and speaking truth. Okay, this is one form of or one view of justice. And then Polemarchus, who's son of Cephalus, he says justice is art of doing good to friends and harm to enemy. What does it mean? Suppose if you are a king and one of your friend has committed crime, so just so that he's your friend, you can deny him from getting a getting a punishment, and you can in turn harm those who are not your friends. So this is one view of justice. Then the next one is Thrasymachus of sophist view. So in this, justice is nothing but might is right. Okay, the stronger one survives in the society, and the weaker one must obey to the orders of the stronger ones. Then Glaucon theory of justice is a sort of contract. Okay, because he doesn't go by the view of justice is nothing and justice is nothing but might is right. And the next one is traditional, like these are three views are traditional views, radical view, which is by sophist, and the pragmatic views. But according to Plato, after listening to all the three arguments, he has come up with his own meaning of justice. So for him, justice must be prevailed in both individual and state. He doesn't just tie the concept of justice to just the individual, but the state must also understand what is justice and the law must be enacted accordingly. So he gives three reasons for this reason, spirit, and appetite influences human soul. He says justice changes. This is doing individuals minding one's own business. He gives reason, spirit, and appetite influences human soul. He basically says human soul could be influenced and there's one dominating feature. This could be either reason or wisdom or spirit or appetite. Appetite matlab appetite or this appetite for materialistic things. So assigning tasks according to his capacity and merit. So if this is one of the dominating feature of reason or spirit or appetite, the individual must be assigned tasks according to their capacity and merit. On what capacity and merit? On what is their dominant feature? So whether is it spirit or whether is it appetite or whether is it reason. And if once an individual is assigned their duties, one must never interfere in each other one's duties. So that's how we can maintain peace and justice can be prevailed in the state. So he says harmony among these three classes in order to present wisdom, courage, and temperance. Harmony among these three classes matlab reason, spirit, and appetite. In whatever individual's reason, spirit, and appetite is a dominating feature, forms three classes, right? So these three classes must maintain harmony among themselves. Otherwise, they would interfere in each other's duty. Then that would lead to prevalence of no justice in the state. That would lead to natural state law, nature of law. So he wants the harmony among all the three classes. Then there's a lot of, see, if there is any theory, there is criticism to such theories. So here also, There's a criticism to Plato's theory of justice because it lacks legal sanctions. It is based on moral principles. So, if we go to the second point, according to Plato, justice must be prevailed in both individual and state. So, he does not give any criteria, neither does he make a law that how justice could be considered or how justice should be made prevail. So here it lacks legal sanctions, and we cannot expect the human beings to live in harmony. Right, you are understanding, right? So, but this type of, and also it totally is based on moral principles. It based on the moral principles of the individuals. So, which is quite impossible to be followed, right? But this could be possible only in city state because Plato is an outcome of a Greek city state. So, keeping that in mind, he made such a theory of justice. So, the next slide, if we go into three qualities of individuals such as reason, spirit, and appetite can hardly be justified. So, uh, this statement means that the reason, spirit, and appetite of an individual, how do you justify that that is a dominating feature? Like, how do I justify that the reason or the wisdom is my dominating feature and I shall abide by it? After few years, I could turn or increase my appetite. Then I might be changing my classes because three dominant features must be divided into three different classes. So these three qualities are hardly justified, which can lead to justice not prevailing in this nation state. And he assigns absolute power to the ruling class, which is philosopher king. We'll be reading philosopher king in the Plato's theory of ideal state. So for now, understand Plato also gave absolute power to the ruling class, that is philosopher king. Then because philosopher king is the ultimate authority in the state. So in order to stop ruling class from misusing their powers, he pleaded for community of wives. So this is also one of the feature of Plato's ideal state. So he called for this property of private property and wives and the children. The philosopher king, who is the ideal ruler, shall not bear children, shall not accumulate property, shall not have wives. So Karl Popper, this is an MCQ. Popper is the greatest critic of Plato. Okay, if there's an option given Plato and Karl Popper, so who criticized most after Aristotle is Karl Popper, the contemporary. So the Plato's concept of justice gives rise to totalitarianism and ignores the principles of equality, individualism, and freedom. So you will understand this once we get into the slide ideal state. But if to be summarized, here Plato says that in the second point, absolute power to the ruling class. And in the third slide, he says the ruler class shall not have the communism of property and the wives. So what does it do? It denies the principle of equality to the individuals in the state, and also it stops individualism and freedom of the philosopher because he shall not have any babies, or he shall not it degrades his or his liberty to having babies or to having children or to own a property. So Plato justice gives rise to class state in which ruling is privilege of a particular class. So he says philosopher king shall be the absolute power. Matlab, he made philosopher king to rule the ideal state. Okay. Who is this philosopher king? This philosopher king belongs to a particular class. What class? The dominant classes we have seen in the earlier slide, where reason is or wisdom is a dominant feature. So now the ruling is just limited to those privileged classes, right? So yeah, this is also an important concept, Plato and soul. So Plato basically divides soul into three kinds of men: the appetite class, courageous class, ruling, or the reasoning class. Okay, so in each soul has three features, out of which one of them is dominant feature. So out of which one of them is dominant feature? Is it appetite or courage or the rule or reasoning? So the dominant feature distinguishes one soul from another: reason, spirit, and appetite. So if there's a reason or ruling, reasoning is dominant, then you belong to the philosopher king. Then if you are courageous enough, you will be put under soldier class. If you have higher appetite than you are the other individual farmers, artisans, the rest of the crowd. So then you can own properties, then you can have wives, etc. So now the most important concept of ideal state, which led or which had greatest impact on Plato's on Western political philosophy. So there are three themes in Plato's ideal state. These three themes are philosopher king, yes, scheme of education, community of wives and property. MCQs, you have to remember. I'll keep saying MCQs, but still you have to understand we are reading it from the multiple choice questions. So philosopher king is wisest of all because reason is the greatest dominant feature, and soldiers are the most courageous. This courage feature is dominant feature in them, and the farmers, businesses, etc., are all common individuals because the appetite or the wish to develop materialistic things are higher in this class. So the philosopher king says justice is prime virtue of state. He has to look after whether justice is prevailing in the in the state or not. Then individual state is individual writ large. So this is a statement by the Plato. You have to understand this statement. Then he gives tripartite division of men. These are this philosopher, king, soldier, and farmers. This tripartite division is given by Plato. If there's a question, you have to remember. Then understand what is philosopher king. So we have to understand features. We have to understand the powers. We have to understand the Plato's theory behind philosopher king. So Plato is against democratic system. We all know the reason, because of Athens losing the war and because mostly due to corruption, and he hated democracy among everybody else on in Western philosophy. So he favor government by elite. Who is elite? The philosopher class. Who are philosopher classes? Where the reason dominates in them. So elite, matlab, there are a smaller percentage of people that come after a rigorous education. They end up having a group, or they end up having an individual as a philosopher king. So only those who have reason above all compatible to rule. So philosopher king, why he hated democratic system? Who is philosopher king? Reason is above. Then what he seeks wisdom, truth. Okay, why wisdom and so truth? Because better way to rule, better way to make the individual live peacefully in the state, and interest of philosopher king and state aligns together. Therefore, there won't be any clash. So, what philosopher king must have his interest to be aligned with the state. Matlab, highest individual's interest must be considered. This is just features given by the Plato. Okay. So they are outcome of rigorous training and education, as we have read over 35 years. The scheme of education we'll be reading in the next chapter, but you can remember it's 35 years number. So they are given absolute power and they are not accountable. Okay. They are not responsible to anybody else. You cannot question them because they are absolute, they are authority, they are highest authority in the state. And how they are given absolute power? Here, interest of philosopher king and the state aligns together, therefore there won't be any clash. So this statement you have to read together, then you'll understand why absolute powers. And second, third one here is they are not accountable because they are given a rigorous training. So in those training years, it is thought by Plato that these philosopher king where the wisdom seeking truth dominates, they won't be corrupt and they will abide by individual interests. Some basic principles of philosopher king you can understand if this comes as a multiple MCQs, or like one or A, B, C, like that option, A or B, B or C, C or D, like that options. Philosopher king must maintain size of state's territory. So also, yeah, he must ensure duties assigned to citizens are performed. What? What is this line? Must ensure duties assigned to citizens are performance. Citizen must do their duties assigned. Then only what? Justice prevails, right? So his main principle is to prevail justice in the state, maintain the size of the state to protect it from the external territory, and no changes must be made in education. Okay, this education, Plato gives utmost importance to education, where he doesn't deny education to anybody else. He gives education must be under state, okay, state system of education, and even women are not denied from getting an education in Plato's ideal state. So criticism, of course, there has to be criticisms to the theories. So the first criticism is absolute power leads to tyrannical rule, because there are no certain restrictions on what are the powers of philosopher king. And also Plato thought that over this rigorous education, this philosopher kings might not go against or might not act in their own interest, but they would act along with the state interest. So they neglect majority of population and capable of governing state. This is for what? This is in this slide, we saw their outcome of rigorous training and education spread over 35 years. So this 35 years of training, how did they end up having 35 years of training? Because at each stage, the students were drawn out, the best meritorious students were extended, and at the over 35 years, few people who are left are made philosopher king. So in a way, it neglects majority of population, right? Like you have to cut down on the basis of merit. The scheme of education covers only 80 classes, ignores most of the individuals. This scheme of education, he says, education must be state-based. Okay, state should look into education, and initially education will be provided by the state for all. But after certain age, only the elite class, that the class that have gone through the merit, will only be the given education, and the rest of the classes must do the works that they are assigned with, like whatever the dominant feature has come up in them. So it contradicts both the indirect and indirect principles of Plato's justice. So scheme of education of philosopher king is highly defective. So we all know that. So absolute power encourages philosopher king to promote his interests at the cost of citizens' safety. So Karl Popper says it's a selfish motive. So as I've told, Karl Popper is the greatest critic of philosopher Plato. Then he says it's highly utopian, no historical evidence, impractical superstructure. So Plato's methodology is basically normative, because they are not based on evidences, they are not based on scientific explanations. They are just randomly the outcome of Plato's surroundings, Plato's views on his surroundings that Athens was going through. So, and also this is something which is utopian, like this is not possible in a quite human world. And as we know, there is no historical evidence for philosopher king establishment and also establishment of ideal state. And this superstructure, like there's a first of philosopher king, then the social class, then the artisan or uh, the appetite class. So this superstructure is basically is based on the dominant feature of the soul or the spirit. Next important feature of ideal state is theory or scheme of education. So here he says education must be state control, as we all might have understood in Philosopher King itself. So it must be, it must not be left at the hands of discretion of parents. Okay, so parents doesn't have control of their children's education. It is state control. So he did not exclude women. So Plato in the later part also termed as the first feminist because he gave equal rights to women. And also the philosopher king word, he says philosopher king is just an universal term. It could be both women or men. So he does not deny women to be not to be ruling the state. So it is meant for artisans and peasants. So strict censorship of all literary and artistic words. So here Plato actually made censorship of all the literary and artistic words, which in a way actually disrupts the freedom of the individuals. He had most of the control on the words or the conversations that youth should be having. So it aimed at both moral as well as physical education. Yes, interestingly, his education included astrology, gymnasium, then sciences, physics, geometry, etc. which where both moral and the physical education was covered. So the main objective, okay, so he came up with this main objective is to produce Philosopher King. If we decode that, because Philosopher King undergoes 35 years of rigorous training, and the curriculum include two stages of education: elementary education and higher education. So this elementary is in a way divided into three stages based on the age of the individual. So from birth to 6 years, second stage is from 6 to 18, third stage is from 18 to 20 years. You have to remember this birth years. We might not know what they come up with in the exam. And the higher education is from 20 to 35 years. So the criticism, of course, theory, there has to be criticism. So the criticism of scheme of education is it only covers the guardian classes and ignores peasants and artisans, because from 20 to 35, the rigorous training of the philosopher king goes, and those who have passed out until the 20 years or so, they have to get back to their the dominant feature. So no majorly time left to pursue interest, because the philosopher king undergoes 35 years of education, right? So in this way, he does not or she does not have any time to undergo or look into their hobbies. Nowadays, everybody's got their hobby either to photography or videography or reading books or suppose painting. They have no time left to pursue such things, so they are mostly to be put into this training of education. And censorship of art is highly derogatory. So we all know that only certain terms or certain conversations are controlled, where it restricts the flow of ideas or the opinions of the youth. So there's no provision to impart education in art of administration. So there are little or less provisions for education to be added in the art of administration. So this administration as a concept won't be taught rigorously. So lack of ideal of action and contemplation. Then Aristotle's criticism of Plato. So this is an interesting thing. Aristotle is the student of Plato. Okay. He joined academy, and where he actually learned this dialectical methods. He made rigorous studies over there. So Plato's ideal, he is a more greatest critic of Plato. The student of is the greatest critic of teacher of everywhere. It's the same. So the Plato's ideal state is merely an enlarged version of family. So why did he come up with this concept is because this communism of wives leads to social disharmony and causes harm to community interests. This child born out of this alliance will not be able to get care and nourishment. It reduces human beings to position of stock animals. It ignores majority of citizens and intended only philosopher class makes them happy. So these are all the possible criticisms by Plato. This is purposefully like for the theoretical perspective, but you can understand Aristotle is the greatest critic of Plato. In his later part of life, Plato wrote The Statesman and Laws. So these works specially deal with problem of place of law in state. Earlier it was only philosophy. Now here law of state has come into picture. So in Statesman, uh, real states are involved and republic is treated as model of otherworldly or heavenly. So he classified these into 6 constitutions of states. You have to remember this number. So out of 6, 3 are law abiding and 3 are lawless. The law-abiding are monarch, role of one, his favorite, aristocracy, role of few, and moderate democracy. The 3 lawless are tyranny, oligarchy, and extreme democracy, which are in a way corrupt. This democracy example is from Athens. So I'll repeat again. He classified in statesmen, he classified this constitution of our states into 6. Okay. Out of the 6, 3 are law-abiding, 3 which follow laws and 3 doesn't follow laws. Or mostly they are corrupt. Who are those 3 that follow laws? Monarchy, aristocracy, and moderate democracy. What are other things that doesn't follow? Tyranny, oligarchy, and extreme democracy. Okay, you have to remember these things because we are hitting it from MCQ perspective. So he says monarchy is the best outcome of that. And he rates worst is moderate democracy. And in the laws is a book. In the laws, just like the statesman, example, statesman and laws. So in laws, he says second best state, ideal state is proposed. This is also a question. You can say second best ideal state is proposed in first republic, second option laws, third option statesman, fourth option politics. So correct answer is laws, second option. So in this state is supreme and government recognizes claims to power. Yeah, here no philosopher king. State is a supreme ultimate reality, and the government or the king which forms the individual who forms the who takes the control gets the majority, they claim to power. Okay, they form a government and claim to power. And here he gives what city state could be. He says city state should consist of 50-40 households. He came up with this magic number of 50-40, and each family must have equal plots, no excess children because the community of wives, and because the children will be left with no fixed or no original family. And he gives proposal for how the three governing bodies should be there: town meeting, council, and magistrates. So if you can look into this, we can do around 8 to 10 MCQs. So read the slide properly. And the next, if we summarize Plato's philosophy, Plato's justice is what? One must perform his duties as to his best capacities because of the dominant feature they have. The next one is functional specialization. Why? Every individual must perform their duties as assigned. Why? For the justice to prevail in the state. Then rule of wise and virtuous. This is philosopher king. So the most virtuous ruler in the society, in the larger interest of the community. So this philosopher king main agenda is to rule based on interest of larger society. Then emancipation of women. Women should be given equal opportunities in education and take part in state affairs. So here Plato is considered as a first feminist because he gave equal rights to women, especially in ancient Greek city state. They were not given equal rights. Then importance of education. He called for state control education, and no one should be denied of it. And also parents doesn't have control over their child's education, right? So then utilitarianism. Law should be aimed at promoting maximum good and happiness of maximum number of people. Yes, the ultimate goal of here, if we go to the previous slide, most virtuous rule should be in larger society's interest, right? So to what? To make maximum good and happiness of larger number of people. Then he gave organic theory, then organic theory of state. So Plato is also considered as a father of organic theory of state. Again, another MCQs. He says state as a whole, individual should constitute the part of the state. Okay. Individuals are ultimate part of the state, and state is an ultimate outcome of it. Fascism and Plato. So Plato is also called as father of modern fascism, as he considered individual as subordinate to state. Why? In the above thing, state as a whole, individuals should constitute part of the state. State is the bigger entity. Individuals are subordinate to the state. Then he is an utopian, empiricist, and provisional. Utopian because the idea of philosopher king, the ideal state are all otherworldly or the not the original ideas. Then he is an empiricist because his theories are not based on scientific explanations, and provisional. So he is utopian, empiricist, and provisional. If we go to the summary, just here we can get the maximum number of points. What is justice? He must perform his duties, best capacities. Everybody must do the duties performed to them. A rule should be by the wise and virtuous. Women must be given equal rights. Then he gave importance to state education, state control education. The next law should be aimed as promoting maximum happiness. That is the purpose of main law. Then he gave organic theory of state, where state is an whole individual should constitute part of it. Then fascism on Plato, father of modern political fascism, because he is individuals are subordinate. Then he's a utopian. Yes. So then this is important from the theory perspective, but I'll just get into it. So Plato's the theory of forms, where the allegory of caves is explained. So theory of forms, he says, ideas are not of this world or this time. Ideas are eternal. So as they are eternal and permanent, the idea doesn't change, but the must be different. The reality is different from the idea. Suppose, example, um, there's a chair you are sitting on and listening to this class. The chair, the idea of chair is there. Even if the chair is broken, we can, and the reality, in the reality, if the chair is broken, that idea is still present, right? So he says the ultimate thing that exists is this idea. Example, uh, the chair concept only. This we only when we know that this is the perfect form of idea, then we could be able to establish the differences. So in a way, he says idea is different from any particular item. So this chair might break, but the living idea of chair doesn't vanish. So if we wind up, we have learned so far about introduction, his life and works, theory of justice, the Plato and soul, ideal state, statement and laws, what are statement and laws contained, criticism of Plato by Aristotle. So yeah, you have to practice, look into the approach this concept from MCQ point of view. So thank you.